Hi, I'm Mark with Crown and Caliber, and welcome to Hidden Gems. Today we have a watch that I have been wanting to get in since we first started the series. It is, to me, the definition of a hidden gem, something that hides in plain sight, but as you get closer, it just blows you away. It's the OMEGA Speedmaster 50th anniversary. So let's get into it. So to start with, the OMEGA Speedmaster 50th anniversary, there's actually two of them. There's one that's very well known that they made a much larger run of that has the hippocampus that Omega uses near the 12 o'clock position. Not the one we're talking about. This is the one that they made in a smaller run. Made 1,957 for the year 1957 when the OMEGA Speedmaster was launched. They really fly under the radar. It's hard to see them in pictures, it's hard to know that they're different, and I think that's the coolest part about them. When you get into this watch, every little thing is special. It's done to an extra degree. It's as if Omega looked at what the Speedmaster is and has been, the tradition that's been that way since the mid-60s, and said, okay, but what if we tweaked it a little bit? It's fun to look at. You should start with that. It is the typical OMEGA Speedmaster case that's been used since the mid-60s. It's the twisted lugs, it's the asymmetrical case that helps guard the crowns. It's a fantastic watch. It's a look that has stood the test of time. But then everything else about it's a little bit different. This is a sapphire sandwich, so it has sapphire in the front and back. It doesn't have the old hestilite crystal. When you get closer, you'll notice that the logo on it is the old Omega logo used before the 60s. It's a nice throwback logo. It's also used on the crown, it's used on the bracelet. I personally love it, and Omega likes to bring it out for special editions, and that's a nice little tweak on the watch. But when you really look at this watch, side by side with a regular sapphire sandwich Omega Speedmaster, that's when it really appears. This is not your daddy's Speedmaster. This watch 10 feet away, across the room, looks like it. But when you get up close, you'll suddenly see that this isn't a lacquer dial. This is a black enamel dial. Enamel, in general, is a very hard thing to do. There's a high error rate when making the dial, so it's expensive to make them. A lot get thrown away. And then black enamel shows every single flaw, every single crack, and because of that, it's not used. Patek doesn't like to use it, Breguet doesn't like to use it, Jacques Droz, who is kind of an enamel specialist, do not use it often. This dial puts it in the realm of higher horology. This is a dial that usually comes on a watch that adds a zero to the price. It's a watch that is in a different league when you have this kind of dial. And that's just the front. Then you get to the back of this watch, and you suddenly notice this isn't the 1861 movement that was being used in the regular Speedmasters at this time. It's instead a modified Breguet 1180. If that sounds familiar, it's because we've talked about it in the Blanc Pan in the past, the Breguet 1185. This is the manual wind version of it. And this is the movement that's used in the Vacheron Overseas when they first had the chronographs. It's the movement that's used in the Royal Oaks when they first came out with the chronographs. It's still used in Blanc Pans, Breguet Marines. Where this movement's used, watches that are in a different zip code than Omega plays in. And that's special for this watch. But it also has something those don't have. They added a coaxial to it. So this has Omega's signature escapement that brings the most modern escapement technology that's mass produced to one of the most modern chronograph movements used. And a Speedmaster whose usual movement is fantastic, it's robust, it's legendary, but it isn't high horology. It's a very basic lever horizontal clutch escapement chronograph, which are very good. They can be made in mass, they're bulletproof, they're fantastic, but they don't push the technology. They don't add that extra layer of watchmaking to it. This does. This creates the vertical clutch, column wheel, let the second hand run all day movement that is going to be one of those things that's worth showing off, and they do, and it's worth looking at. And then on top of that, add that escapement to it, which is almost showing up those other brands. It's in something you don't see, from a distance. It's something that Omega didn't have to make this thing gaudy and show off. They instead took a Speedmaster, made it look like a Speedmaster from across the room, but then tweaked this, tweaked that in ways that are worth appreciating. And it gets exponentially more expensive and harder, and you can't mass produce to go from lacquer dials to enamel, to go from lever clutch to the column wheel vertical clutch. I mean, these things aren't done in all watches because they're hard. They take time, they take effort. So you can make a great watch without them, but to go up, to go from good to great requires so much extra effort. And it's why those watches usually come with an extra zero at the end, or a couple extra zeros at the end. They take so much extra labor and time and effort that you get diminishing returns, but some of us really appreciate that. They appreciate the extra effort and work that's done into it. And Omega did that here. The Speedmaster is a great watch, but they took all that extra effort to make an exceptional watch in this case, to bring it up a notch. And it's why Omega does limited editions. Yes, there's a sales point to it, but they also get to show off. They get to do things like different movements, different dials. They get to put an entire movement on the back of the new Snoopy watch that you wouldn't normally do, but it's great because they can put out limited runs like that. Sometimes they're very easy to see, sometimes they're very obvious, but this is not it. And to me, all these little differences, all these little changes that take it from a Speedmaster to a hierology Speedmaster, and all of that is why the OMEGA Speedmaster 50th anniversary is a hidden gem. Thank you for joining me. Let me know what you thought about the Speedmaster 50th anniversary or any other hidden gems out there in the comments below. See you next time.